April 1945. Northern Germany. The war is collapsing in slow motion. Sergeant Daniel Mercer of the U.S. 2nd Armored Division stands at the edge of a pine forest near the village of Gardelegen. His boots sink into wet sand. The air smells of sap, cordite, and something fouler drifting from the east. The Third Reich is dying, but it refuses to do so quietly. Daniel is 27. A former mechanic from Ohio. Grease once lived under his fingernails. Now it is gun all. His M1 Garand rests against his shoulder, steel cold beneath gray skies. The front line has dissolved into pockets of resistance and columns of surrendering. Germans moving west, desperate to avoid the Soviets. A jeep rattles up the muddy track. Captain Ellis leans out, jaw tight. Recon picked up movement near the rail depot. Ellis says, SS guards, not surrendering. Daniel nods once. The SS rarely do. They advance through thinning woods, half-track engines rumbling low behind them. Somewhere ahead, a machine gun chatters, short and nervous bursts, not aimed, warning fire, or panic. Daniel signals his squad forward. Corporal Ramirez moves left, bar ready. Private Wilkes, barely 19, swallows hard and keeps his rifle steady. The depot comes into view through smoke drifting across the tracks. Railcars sit abandoned, doors hanging open. A white sheet flutters from one boxcar. Surrender. Then Daniel sees them. A line of German soldiers, but not boys, not old Volkssturm. Women. They stand rigid beside a warehouse wall. Field gray uniforms tailored but unmistakable. Waffen SS insignia on their collars. Some clutch rifles. Others hold nothing at all. Their faces are pale, streaked with soot and exhaustion. Daniel lowers his rifle an inch, confused. Women? Wilkes whispers. Stay sharp, Daniel mutters. A shot cracks from somewhere behind the depot. An American falls. Ramirez dives for cover, returning fire. The warehouse windows explode outward in splinters. The women do not fire. They stand frozen as bullets snap overhead. Daniel moves forward through the chaos, heart pounding. He expects fanaticism, suicide charges, last stands. That is what intelligence reports say about SS units. Instead, one of the women steps forward. She cannot be more than 23. Blonde hair tucked beneath a crushed field cap. Her hands rise slowly. We surrender, she says in accented but clear English. Another shot rings out from the warehouse roof. An American machine gun answers with brutal finality. A body tumbles down the tiles. Daniel keeps his eyes on the woman. Her gaze does not waver. Behind her, more women drop their weapons. One begins to cry but forces herself silent. Captain Ellis strides up, pistol drawn. He looks from the dead American to the SS insignia. Waffen SS, he demands. The blonde nods once. The wind shifts. From the east, distant artillery rolls like thunder. The Soviets are closer than anyone expected. Daniel feels the weight of it. The shooting stops as suddenly as it began. Only the wind moves now, dragging smoke across the rail yard like a curtain refusing to fall. Sergeant Daniel Mercer keeps his rifle leveled. The blonde SS woman stands 10 paces away, hands still raised. Her sleeves bear the faded eagle and the runes of the Waffen SS. Not auxiliaries, not nurses, combat personnel. Captain Ellis steps forward, pistol steady. Who's in command here? He asks. The woman hesitates only a second. Obersturmführer Marta Keller. A ripple moves through Daniel's squad. A female officer. Late war has twisted everything. Ellis studies her. Your unit? Signals and transport attachment. Reassigned from Berlin 3 weeks ago. Berlin. Daniel feels the war narrowing into something desperate and feral. Berlin means collapse. It means Hitler still hiding underground, while boys and old men bleed in the streets. Ramirez searches the prisoners quickly, boots scraping gravel. Rifles, a few pistols, spare magazines. No grenades, no hidden blades. One woman flinches when Wilkes pats down her coat. Daniel catches the fear in her eyes. Not defiance. Fear. Another American squad secures the warehouse. 2 SS men lie dead on the roof, machine gun twisted beside them. Fanatics to the end. Ellis lowers his pistol slightly. You are holding this depot for what? Marta answers evenly. Orders were to secure documents and await evacuation west. Evacuation from who? Ramirez mutters. She does not answer that. A distant rumble rolls across the flat land again. Artillery. Closer now. The Soviets are cutting through what remains of the German interior, like a blade through cloth. Daniel watches the women's faces at the sound. The discipline cracks for a second. One closes her eyes. Another whispers something under her breath, prayer or curse. They are not afraid of Americans. They are afraid of the East. Ellis exchanges a look with Daniel. We move them to Battalion HQ. Now. Daniel nods. He gestures to Wilkes. Cuff pairs, keep spacing. As zip ties bite into wrists, Marta keeps her back straight. She watches Daniel instead of the captain. You are not Russians, she says quietly. No, Daniel replies. A pause hangs there. Then we are fortunate, she says. Daniel says nothing. He thinks of the camps they have begun to uncover across Germany. The bodies, the evidence, the smell that clings to everything. Fortunate is not the word he would use. The column begins to move west along the tracks. American half-tracks rumble beside them, guns trained outward. Overhead, Allied fighters slice through low cloud cover, hunting anything still flying. The swastika. Wilkes edges closer to Daniel. Sarge, what happens to them? Daniel keeps walking. Depends, he says. On what? He does not say. Behind them, a dull explosion rocks the depot. Soviet artillery has found its mark. Smoke blooms black against the gray sky. Daniel glances back once. The road west is crowded with the wreckage of a nation coming apart. Sergeant Daniel Mercer marches beside the column, boots striking broken asphalt littered with discarded helmets, torn packs, and abandoned carts. German civilians move in the opposite direction, pushing handcarts piled with bedding and children. No one speaks. The only sound is artillery, rolling from the east like distant thunder that never stops. The captured SS women walk in pairs, wrists bound, guarded front and rear. Their uniforms are worn thin, collars frayed, insignia dulled by smoke and dust. They no longer look like propaganda posters. They look like soldiers who have lost. Obersturmführerin Marta Keller keeps pace at the head of the prisoners. Her posture remains rigid, but her boots drag slightly. Daniel notices details automatically: the stitching on her collar tabs, the silver piping of her rank, the mud caked along the hem of her coat. Berlin issue. Late production. Shortages everywhere. A column of American Shermans passes them, engines growling, white stars bright against olive drab hulls. Tankers stare at the prisoners with open disbelief. SS, one tanker calls out. Daniel nods once. The tanker spits over the side and rolls on. They reach a crossroads where a burned-out Panther tank sits like a carcass. Its turret is blown open, blackened steel peeled back. A German boy no older than 16 lies beside it under a blanket. A civilian woman kneels next to him, silent, eyes hollow. Marta's gaze flickers toward the wreck for half a second. Something shifts in her expression. Not grief. Recognition. You still believed in victory? Daniel asks quietly as they walk. She looks at him. Belief stopped mattering in January. Then why fight? Because surrender was not offered. Daniel studies her profile. It is not defiance he sees. It is calculation. Ahead, battalion headquarters is set up in a requisition farmhouse. Radio antennas rise from the yard. Jeeps idle. Medics move in and out with stretchers. As they approach, a low roar cuts across the sky. Everyone freezes. Wolf fighters burst from cloud cover, flying dangerously low. Desperate. One strafes the road, round snapping into dirt and flesh. Civilians scatter. An American truck erupts in sparks and smoke. Daniel shoves Marta to the ground and throws himself beside her as bullets chew into the roadside fence. Ramirez opens up with the bar, tracers climbing toward the sky. A Sherman's .50 caliber joins in, thunderous and steady. One German fighter spirals upward, engine trailing smoke. The other clips a tree line and explodes in a bloom of fire beyond the fields. Silence returns, heavier than before. Daniel pushes himself up. Marta is already on her knees, wrists still bound. Eyes scanning the sky like a trained officer assessing airspace. You could have run, Daniel says. She meets his stare. To where? Smoke drifts across the road. The farmhouse headquarters disappears behind them as quickly as the illusion of order. Sergeant Daniel Mercer rides in the back of a deuce-and-a-half truck, rifle across his knees, boots braced against the wooden slats. Across from him sit 4 of the captured SS women, wrists bound, helmets removed. The truck smells of wet wool, gasoline, and fear kept carefully hidden. The convoy moves fast now. To Sherman's lead, a half-track follows behind with a mounted .50 scanning the tree line. Division orders are clear. Deliver the prisoners to Corps intelligence near the Elbe. Immediately, Captain Ellis climbs into the truck bed briefly before departure. Division intercepted radio chatter, he says. Berlin tried to contact this unit yesterday. Something about sealed dispatches. He looks directly at Marta Keller. You carrying orders from the Führer himself? Marta's face remains composed. Berlin sends many messages. That wasn't an answer. It was the only one you will receive. Ellis studies her a moment longer, then jumps down as the convoy lurches forward. The road narrows through forest. Pines close in on both sides, tall and skeletal against a colorless sky. Daniel watches the prisoners closely. Most stare at the floorboards. One murmurs under her breath in German, counting, maybe. Another keeps glancing east, as if she can see beyond the trees. Your signals, Daniel says to Marta over the engine noise. You're not frontline infantry. No. Then why were you defending a rail depot? Because the men assigned to it ran. There is no sarcasm in her voice, only fact. The truck jolts over a crater, throwing everyone sideways. One of the younger women loses balance and nearly falls. Daniel instinctively grabs her arm to steady her. She recoils at first, then freezes, surprised. For a moment, they lock eyes. She looks barely older than Wilkes. The convoy halts abruptly. Engines idle. Up ahead, shouting. Daniel grips his rifle and peers over the side. A German column blocks the road. Volkssturm militia mixed with Wehrmacht stragglers. White cloths tied to rifle barrels. Dozens of them. Surrendering. Sherman turrets rotate slowly, cautiously. Captain Ellis steps forward to negotiate, pistol lowered but ready. The scene is tense, brittle. A single nervous shock could ignite everything. Daniel turns back toward the prisoners. Marta is watching the surrendering Germans with something like disbelief. They waited too long, she says quietly. For what? Daniel asks. For permission. The standoff stretches. Then, from deeper in the forest, a sharp crack splits the air. A sniper round slams into the lead Sherman's hull, ricocheting in sparks. Chaos detonates instantly. Machine guns roar. Civilians scream. The surrendering Germans dive for cover, unsure who fired. Daniel throws himself against the truck wall as bullets tear through branches overhead. In the confusion, one of the SS women shifts suddenly. Daniel sees it the smallest movement. Machine guns hammer into the tree line. Shermans answer with deafening bursts, their coaxial guns stitching the underbrush. The surrendering Germans scatter in blind terror, unsure whether they are targets or witnesses. Sergeant Daniel Mercer spins inside the truck bed, eyes locking onto the metallic flash in the SS woman's sleeve. Don't, he snaps. Too late. She wrenches her wrists downward. A thin steel blade no longer than a finger slides free from the lining of her cuff. Not a combat knife, a smuggled tool. Marta sees it at the same moment Daniel does. Anna, no, she shouts in German. The young woman lunges not at Daniel, not at the Americans but toward the side of the truck. Daniel grabs her shoulder as the truck jolts from another near impact. Bullets crack overhead, punching through canvas. The girl twists violently, blade flashing again. For a split second Daniel thinks she means to stab him. Instead, she drives the blade into the rope binding her wrists. The fibers snap. She dives over the truck wall into the chaos beyond. Damn it, Ramirez yells. Daniel scrambles to the edge. Through smoke and flying debris he spots her sprinting toward the forest. Gray coat flaring behind her. She runs straight toward the sniper's direction. Not away from danger. Toward it. Cover me. Daniel shouts, already jumping down. Boots hit mud. He sprints after her, weaving through panicked militiamen dropping rifles and pressing themselves flat. A Sherman's main gun booms somewhere to his left, the shockwave slamming through his chest. Ahead, Anna stumbles but keeps running. Another sniper crack. A U.S. private falls beside the road. Daniel's jaw tightens. This is no random shot. The sniper is disciplined, patient. Anna vanishes into the trees. Daniel plunges in after her. The forest swallows sound, turning battle into muffled thunder. Pine needles carpet the ground. Visibility drops to shadows and movement. He slows, raising his Garand. Stop, he calls. You won't make it. No answer. A flicker of gray darts between trunks. Then, a shot rings out from deeper within. Not toward the road. Toward her. Daniel freezes. A body collapses ahead, crumpling into moss and needles. He advances carefully, rifle trained. Anna lies face down, unmoving. Blood seeps dark into the forest floor. A second figure steps from behind a tree. Not SS. A Wehrmacht sniper in splinter camouflage, rifle still shouldered. His eyes are wild, desperate. He has no intention of surrendering to anyone. He works the bolt calmly, lining up another shot this time toward the road. Daniel exhales once and squeezes the trigger. The Garand cracks. The sniper jerks backward and falls against the trunk. Silence returns, broken only by distant gunfire fading as the skirmish dies. Daniel lowers his rifle and looks down at Anna. Her blade lies beside her open hand. She was not trying to escape. She was trying to reach him, to stop the sniper before more Americans died. Behind Daniel, boots crunch softly. They bury her where she fell. No ceremony, no marker. Sergeant Daniel Mercer stands in the pine forest as two Americans scrape a shallow grave with entrenching tools. The ground is soft from spring thaw. The war has made the earth easy to open. The remaining prisoners watch from a guarded distance. Their gray uniforms blend with the trees, ghost-like against drifting smoke. No one cries. No one speaks. Marta Keller steps forward once the grave is filled. Ramirez tenses, but Daniel gives a slight nod. Marta looks down at the fresh soil. She was 19, she says quietly. Radio operator. From Dresden. Daniel says nothing. She believed the war would end differently. Marta continues. We all did, at first. Daniel steadies her face. It is not grief in the way he understands it. It is something restrained, military. You knew about the sniper, he asks. She shakes her head. No. But I knew she would not run from you. Why? Because you are not the Red Army. The words hang in the cool air. Back on the road, the surrendering Germans have been disarmed and herded aside. The sniper's body lies where it fell, helmet rolled away, rifle snapped into by a tank tread. The convoy is reorganizing quickly. No one wants to linger. Captain Ellis approaches Daniel. Division confirmed it, he says. Intercept decoded. These women carried encrypted traffic from Berlin. High priority. About what? Ellis hesitates. Negotiation. Daniel looks back toward Marta. With who? That's the question. The convoy moves again, engines grinding forward. The forest thins into open farmland. In the distance, smoke pillars rise from towns already claimed by artillery. Inside the truck bed, silence stretches between Daniel and Marta as the remaining prisoners sit rigidly. You expected to reach the Americans, Daniel says finally. Yes. Why? Because surrender to you means interrogation. To the Soviets, it means disappearance. Daniel cannot argue that. And Berlin, he presses. What were you negotiating? Marta's gaze drifts to the western horizon. Time. The truck jolts as they cross a small bridge over a narrow river. Beneath it, refugees wade through shallow water, pushing carts to avoid the clogged roads. Daniel feels the war closing in from both sides. West is survival. East is reckoning. A runner from the lead tank scrambles back along the convoy. Sergeant, orders just changed. Soviet forward elements spotted less than 10 miles out. 10 miles. Too close. Ellis climbs onto the truck step again. We push hard for the Elbe crossing, he says. No delays. Daniel nods. But as he looks at Marta, he realizes something unsettling. She does not seem surprised, as if the Soviet speed is not a disaster, but part of the calculation. And somewhere ahead, on the river that divides victory from vengeance, something is waiting. The Elbe River comes into view just before dusk. It is wider than Daniel Mercer imagined. Cold, gray, moving slow but relentless beneath. A sky bruised purple by smoke and evening light. On the western bank, American engineers work frantically, laying down a temporary pontoon bridge while trucks and armor stack up in long, impatient lines. On the eastern horizon, artillery flashes like silent lightning. The Soviets are close enough to feel. Move them up, Captain Ellis orders. Daniel guides the prisoners from the truck. Boots splash in river mud. The air smells of fuel, damp canvas, and something metallic drifting from upstream or bleeding into water. A military police detachment takes position near the crossing. They stare opally at the SS runes on gray collars. Women, one MP mutters. Waffen SS, Daniel answers flatly. That changes the look in the MP's eyes. Marta stands at the water's edge, hands still bound, gaze fixed on the far bank. For a moment, the fading light softens her face. Then the sound of distant Soviet Katyusha rockets rolls across the valley like tearing fabric. Even the Americans flinch. They're pushing hard, Ramirez says under his breath. A jeep skids to a stop beside Ellis. A major climbs out, boots splashing. You Mercer? The major asks. Yes, sir. You were present at the capture. Yes, sir. The major studies Marta and the others carefully. Intelligence wants them across immediately. Corps believes Berlin transmitted something through this unit in the final hours. Daniel glances at Marta. What kind of something? He asks. The major's jaw tightens. Proposal for localized surrender to Western forces only. The words settle heavy in Daniel's chest. Separate peace. Hitler dividing the Allies even in collapse. They were trying to buy time, Daniel says quietly. For who? Ramirez asks. Before Daniel can answer, shouting erupts upstream. A column of Soviet scouts appears on the opposite ridge, dark silhouettes, against fading light. They are not firing. Not yet. American soldiers stiffen instinctively. The bridge is only half complete. Ellis turns sharply. Get those prisoners moving. Daniel pushes Marta forward toward the unfinished pontoon. The river slaps against metal floats. Engineers curse as planks shift under weight. Halfway across, Marta stumbles as the bridge sways. Daniel catches her elbow. You planned this, he says low, almost accusing. She looks up at him, eyes reflecting the last light of day. No, she says. Berlin planned. We were only messengers, and the message, that Germany would surrender in the West, and continue fighting in the East. The implication is clear. Let the Americans and British take territory peacefully. Hold back the Soviets. Divide the victory. A final gamble from a dying regime. The first Soviet flare arcs into the sky behind them, bathing the river in harsh white light. For a breathless moment, the two armies see each other across the water, and Daniel realizes. The Soviet flare burns out, drifting down like a dying star. For a few seconds, the Elbe is silent except for the slap of water against steel pontoons and the creak of rope under strain. Sergeant Daniel Mercer feels every eye on the bridge. American, German, Soviet, history narrowing to a single crossing. Keep moving, Captain Ellis shouts from the western bank. Daniel pushes forward with Marta beside him. The remaining prisoners shuffle quickly now, boots slipping on damp planks. Engineers brace the bridge supports, cursing under their breath. On the eastern ridge, Soviet figures multiply, dark shapes moving with purpose. Binoculars flash in the fading light. A motor launch appears upstream, small, low in the water, flying a red flag. It moves toward mid-river but keeps its distance. They're observing, Ramirez mutters. Daniel reaches the western bank at last. MPs immediately form a cordon around the prisoners. Rifles angled outward, not at the Germans, but toward the river. Captain Ellis jogs up, breathing hard. Radio from Corps, he says. Soviets requesting liaison. They've identified SS prisoners in our custody. How? Wilkes asks. Interrogated locals. And they're not stupid. Across the water, a Soviet loudspeaker crackles to life in heavily accented German. These prisoners are war criminals. They belong to the Red Army. Murmurs ripple through the American line. Marta stands very still. Daniel steps closer to her. Were you involved in camps? Her jaw tightens. No, that's not what I asked. Her eyes flicker anger now. We were signals officers. We transmitted orders. We did not write them. Daniel thinks of the camps his division passed weeks ago. The skeletal survivors. The mass graves. Transmission is not innocence. Another flare rises. This one red. The Soviet launch edges closer. Captain Ellis swears under his breath. Washington wants coordination, not conflict. So what's the call? Ramirez asks. Ellis looks at Daniel. Intelligence hasn't finished with them. Until they do, they're ours. A Soviet officer stands upright in the launch, megaphone raised. You delay justice, he calls in rough English. We know what SS means. Daniel feels the weight of it pressing against his ribs. He turns to Marta one more time. Is there anything in those dispatches that changes this? He asks. She hesitates. For the first time since capture, uncertainty cracks her composure. Yes, she says quietly. What? That Berlin authorized surrender corridors to the west for specific SS units, in exchange for intelligence on Soviet positions. Daniel's stomach tightens. A bargaining chip. Even now, Hitler's last hidden move. Behind him, American machine guns shift slightly, not aimed, but ready. Across the river, Soviet rifles glint in dying light. Two victorious armies, one river between them, and a handful of women standing at the center of a storm that could still ignite. The Soviet launch advances another 10 yards. The river bank feels smaller with every heartbeat. Sergeant Daniel Mercer stands rigid, rifle ready but lowered, as Captain Ellis radios division headquarters. The Americans on the pontoon bridge tense, eyes flicking between prisoners and the water where Soviet boats inch closer. The wind carries the acrid scent of smoke, mud, and diesel. Somewhere upriver, artillery cracks the distant punctuation of a war in its death throes. Marta Keller watches the river, unflinching. Her face is pale, lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel studies her, searching for cracks, for fear, for deceit. She does not flinch, not once. You're still holding something back, he says quietly. I am holding what Berlin commanded, she replies. Her English is precise, almost formal. Information that could change positions, that could save lives, or cost them. Daniel swallows. He knows she speaks the truth. Even in surrender, she is a soldier. Strategy doesn't die with bullets. On the river, the Soviet launch hovers near the middle, small waves rippling against its hull. The officer on board gestures with a megaphone. Americans, he shouts in broken English. Hand over prisoners. These are war criminals. Captain Ellis's hand tightens on his radio. Negative. They're under U.S. custody. Intelligence priority. The Soviet officer slams the megaphone against the deck in frustration. A sharp whistle pierces the evening air, signaling troops along the opposite bank. The first of them begin to form ranks, advancing toward the water with rifles leveled. Daniel glances at Marta. She tilts her head slightly, as if calculating. They know what you're carrying, he says. The dispatches. Marta's jaw tightens. Yes. They will try to take it by force. Then we stop them. Daniel asks. Yes, she says softly, almost like a whisper meant only for him. If we must. A sudden explosion erupts near the bridge. The pontoon shudders violently. Daniel throws himself to the side. Gravel and mud fly up around him. Soldiers shout. Smoke chokes the air. Through the haze, a Soviet figure lunges onto the unfinished bridge from a smaller boat, attempting to grab a prisoner. Daniel fires instinctively. The man collapses into the river with a splash. Others hesitate, frozen by the unexpected gunfire from American positions. Marta steps forward, hands still bound, eyes sharp as a hawk. She points subtly toward the advancing Soviets, whispering something in German. Ramirez nods instantly, adjusting the .50 caliber toward a vulnerable gap in their formation. The tension stretches unbearably. Each heartbeat is a countdown. Every movement could ignite a firefight that neither side can afford. Daniel looks at Marta again. For the first time, he sees her not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a commander executing orders in a war that refuses to end quietly. The bridge sways underfoot. The river churns, and in the distance, more Soviet troops line the bank. Night falls like a shroud over the Elbe. Sergeant Daniel Mercer crouches behind the pontoon's railing, eyes fixed on the river. The Americans have secured the western bank, but the Soviets linger, dark shapes in the distance, boats rocking gently in the current. The air is cold, heavy with mud and smoke, and the distant boom of artillery reminds everyone that the war is far from quiet. Marta Keller stands beside him, hands still bound, shoulders rigid. Her face is calm, almost serene, but Daniel senses the tension beneath the surface. Every soldier, every civilian, every weapon on this riverbank is part of a precarious equation. One misstep, one spark, and it could all explode. Captain Ellis speaks softly into his radio. Division confirms. No one crosses the bridge without orders. Hold positions. Daniel glances at Marta. You knew they'd push. She nods slightly. Berlin gambled. They hoped surrendering to you would force a Western buffer, to delay the Soviets, and to protect secrets. Secrets. Daniel understands. Even in their defeat, the Germans had played one final move. Intelligence packets, encoded dispatches, and the chain of command stretching westward, all designed to survive the collapse and influence post-war outcomes. Hitler may be dead in the mind of the world, but his bureaucracy still breathes. A Soviet flare arcs into the night, igniting the river in red. Shadows of soldiers advance cautiously, rifles reflecting the light. Daniel grips his garand. His men are tense, waiting, ready but untested in negotiation with the Red Army. Suddenly, Marta steps forward. They will not fire, she says quietly. Not unless forced. You hold. They hesitate. Daniel watches her eyes, sharp, calculating. This is not defiance. It is strategy. A Soviet officer raises a white flag on the far bank, shouting commands. The riverbank holds its breath. Move them across. Daniel hears Captain Ellis say. Do it slowly. Keep the lines clear. Engineers guide the remaining SS women onto the bridge. Planks creaking, water churning beneath. Marta is last. Daniel steps close, helping her balance. Her eyes meet his for a heartbeat, calm, knowing, unreadable. They reach the western bank safely. MPs take position immediately, forming a cordon around the prisoners. Daniel exhales. The war has not ended, but this small victory, control over the hidden dispatches, over the prisoners, is enough for now. Marta Keller bows her head slightly, finally releasing a long-held breath. Daniel steadies her face. No gratitude, only recognition. The war has taken everything, but she has kept the one thing Berlin sent her to protect. Somewhere upstream, Soviet artillery flashes again. Soldiers whisper, tense, but for this night, the Americans hold the line. And the hidden move that Berlin sent west to surrender. The negotiations, the preserved intelligence remains intact.